Hello, everybody, and welcome again to another virtual 67 Palmas. My name is Cecilia, and if you are wondering how does a manzanilla become an amontillado, what is a vermouth, or what is a palo cortado, let me tell you that this is a perfect time to know more about this. So let me introduce tonight Tim Holt, who is a sherry expert from Bodegas Barbadillo in Spain. So hello, Tim. How are you doing?
Hi, I'm very well, thank you.
Thank you so much for doing this with us tonight. We are very excited about this lineup. So I will give you the time to continue with the webinar, and anything you need, just say my name. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Cecilia. Thank you for attending. I hope you're going to enjoy the event and the tasting and the wines you have. What I'm going to be doing is just looking at the way sherry is made and concentrating obviously on Barbadillo and specifically following the journey of the grape from the vineyard through to becoming a Manzanilla, and then eventually an Amontillado and an old one indeed. And then we'll be having a look at a couple of other wines, the Palo Cortado and the Vermouth later on. So I put together a little slideshow to accompany this presentation, and somewhere along we'll start trying the wines. So I'll just try and put the said presentation up and take it from there. Go back to. So I think it's working. This is where we begin in the vineyards. We use just the Palomino grape for all the dry sherries, and in fact everything you're trying tonight is all from the Palomino grape. Even the vermouth at the end is made from the Palomino, and so we've got extensive vineyards, Barbadillo. We've got over 500 hectares, and so that's enough to cope with the sherry demand. Although we do actually source some more grapes, some more Palomino from neighbouring vineyards to cope with the demand, not just for the sherry, but also for the white wine, which we make from the Palomino grape. So the soil which the vine grows on is called albariza. It's very chalky soil, and so all our vineyards are on this albariza soil. And so that's the important thing when it comes to the vine. This soil is its properties are really all about water retention. In this part of the world, we have fairly wet winters, mild wet winters, but also very dry summers. So any of that rainfall in the winter, well, the autumn as well, we've had a bit of rain today, it needs to be still in the soil during the rest of the year, because we don't irrigate the Palomino vines. In fact, it's not allowed within the Consejo Regulador. So we have to make sure those tap roots reach down into the thick albariza soil that we have and live off that residual rainfall from the winter months. The map here shows you where we are. Now, I'm assuming there's a certain level of knowledge about sherry here with the group, but just to recap, just in case, the sherry region is in the southwest of Spain in Andalusia. If you drive south, you reach Gibraltar. If you drive north, you get up to Seville. And what you see on this map is the Atlantic Ocean and the river Guadalquivir beginning its, it's coming from Seville, the river. And on this map, you see marked all the pagos of the sherry region. And what I've circled and highlighted up in the top right-hand corner are our vineyards, Santa Lucia, and then top right is the Hibalbin vineyard. So these are the two vineyards we have, and it's we've got mostly Palomino grape there for obviously the sherry and the white wine I mentioned. And this is these are two excellent pagos because it's got really thick albariza soil there. One of the other advantages we have in this region, we're slightly further away from the sea, so we have a slightly drier microclimate, and we're less prone to mildew and botrytis and such like. We also have a slightly higher rainfall here, so that all helps. It also means that we get good grape development, good sugar quantity in the grapes, and we can actually pick earlier than the rest of the region. We pick in late August, and we're pretty much over by early September. You know, we get a good acidity, good baume for the wine. Our pressing machinery and the vinification, all the vinification set up for actually making the white wine is in the Hibalbin vineyard. So I'll take you to that now. This is a picture of all the Palomino grape going into the hopper, and we use a press which is we call in Spanish the prensa continua, the continuous press. And the idea here is that we're trying to extract as much juice out of the grape as possible without applying any pressure. So it's free run juice, and the press basically consists of these helix screws pushing up the grapes along this cylindrical sieve, and just sheerly by gravity the skins are slightly broken, so the juice runs out, and by gravity the must drips through into a holding tank below. Now, as you can see from this picture, perhaps you can just make out the stalks are still on, so we don't destalk the grapes, because that allows for the structure of the mass grapes. It gives it structure and air between the grapes, so that actually the must can drop through and actually leave this mound of grapes. If you destalk, then you just get this big mush, and you wouldn't be able to get rid of the juice without pressing. And obviously, in this process, the wine, the must is in contact with the air. Now, in most cases, the idea of white wine coming into contact with the air is staged as a bit of a no-no. But in our case, we want the must to be well aerated, oxygenated, if you will. We call it hyperoxygenation in winemaking. And this allows it to make contact with certain phenolic compounds mainly, which actually we don't want in the final product. The Palomino grape is very clean tasting. Well, the wine from the Palomino grape is very clean tasting, but only if you go through this process of getting the free run juice and extracting these phenolic compounds through hyperoxygenation. And we ensure that all happens also by keeping the temperature low and keeping it for 24 hours at a low temperature and centrifuging before going into fermentation. And this takes out the sediment and these impurities. And so obviously, because of that whole process, we never use sulfur at this early stage. So we've got a wine which is quite low in sulfur. And then we head into the fermentation process, which is using stainless steel tanks, and they're kept cool by using water down the outside with a refrigeration unit. And very importantly here, Barbadillo, we use our own yeast for fermentation. We actually have selected certain yeasts from the area and cultivated those and use those. And they basically, in our experience, they give us a better result than, on the one hand, letting just the wild yeast do their own thing, or on the other hand, buying in industrial yeast for that purpose. So with these selected yeasts, we're able to ferment at a lower temperature, the slightly more delicate, and we're at a temperature of 17 or 17.5 Celsius. And that's actually lower than other producers in the region. Most will be at about 24 Celsius, to give you an idea. That's partly also to help, in their case, to take out these slightly impure phenolic compounds, which we don't want in the final wine, but we've done that in another way. So we ferment at a low temperature. And the result is a white wine, a dry white wine, which is usually between 11 and 13% in alcohol. So this last vintage was actually 13.5, so it's slightly higher. This white wine is very important to us. As I mentioned before, we do actually sell a lot of this white wine as white wine. It's called Castillo San Diego, or otherwise known as Barbadillo white wine, Barbadillo Blanco. And it's certainly very popular here in Spain anyway. And therefore for us, all this initial process, the vineyards, the selection of the yeast, and how we store the wine after fermentation and under inert gas to keep it fresh and in prime quality, all this is a very important part, not just because of the sherry we make, but because of the white wine we're making here. So it's an essential part for us. The vineyards and the quality of the soil and everything is primary for Barbadillo. Now we get into what you might think is, well, the more interesting part of it, really, in the sense that now we're getting away from the winemaking processes we're familiar with other wines, generally speaking, and we're getting into the bit where we're getting a slightly different, where we're starting to make the Manzanilla. And this picture I'm showing you is important, only to give you an idea of what San Luca looks like. But it's also showing you the view from where most of our bodegas are. Now, bodegas are these big lofty buildings where we store and age the wine, and that's in San Luca on the coast there, next to the Guadalquivir river. And so we got on the left of this photograph, you can just make out the Atlantic Ocean there. So that's the mouth of the river Guadalquivir. But this view is important because it's also showing the access our bodegas have to the sea breeze that comes into San Luca. And this is very important for making Manzanilla. Now, Manzanilla can only be made in the town of San Luca because of its microclimate. The sea breeze that comes in brings in lots of humidity. It also means that in summer we stay relatively cool. So if it's 45 in Jerez, it's still in the low 30s here in San Luca. And the wind regime is quite predominant, and Manzanilla likes a lot of wind. All this will become clear if you don't know about it in a moment as to why that's so important. But anyway, just remember that view, because that is a critical part of where our bodegas are in town. So this is the reason why microclimate is so important for us. This is what a cask of Manzanilla looks like from the inside. So this is a glass fronted, and you can see also below the surface, looking up, we can be looking up at the yeast there and growing on the surface of the wine, and we call that la flor. And you have a small amount of dead yeast just sitting at the bottom of the cask as well. So all casks of Manzanilla look like this, with the floating layer of the yeast. And it's a very delicate organism. The yeast, if it gets too dry, too hot or too cold, it will die off. It will also become very unhappy if it's in a stuffy, closed atmosphere. So he doesn't want a dank atmosphere. It wants a breezy, well aerated area in which to thrive. It's highly aerobic, so it needs that air to thrive. In this picture, by the way, it's a bit of an action shot. We've got this bamboo coming through and take out a sample of the Manzanilla from the cask. We call that the canya, which is the original device used for sampling the wine from the cask as he went along the Solera system to check the wines in each cask. If you look at most wineries in the sherry districts, and especially in Jerez, you'll see they use Venencias, which is a slightly more elaborate version of this.
I'm
so
sorry,
now, just to
Tim.
recap here. Yeah.
I'm sorry. We have a question, by the way. Rosemary Brown, Master of Wine, she's asking how will the floor be affected by warming temperatures, like climate change?
Well, it's difficult to say, especially because we are so close to the sea. The sea is always a moderating influence on any changes. And so if we see any climate change within Spain, then it'll be more evident in inland, in the drier areas where it's less moderated by the sea. There are no obvious trends, say, in more sea breeze or less sea breeze. The sea temperature is not significantly higher here, I don't think, than it has been in the last several years. So those are the factors I think will be most at play. So it's very difficult to say. After all, the evidence on climate change is coming together now, and we can't really we don't have the data to say, well, what's happening here. And it's such a tricky thing to talk about, in the sense that if you go from one end of the town to the other, there are small microclimatic change within town which will affect it. So in fact, one effect that could be more important would be if someone builds a block of flats in front of a bodega and stops the sea breeze and makes it less open to that to the sea breeze coming in. So that would be a more immediately important factor in our developing world and climate at this point. It's such a long scale thing, it's very difficult to say, to be honest. Okay.
Thank you so much for your answer.
Not at all. I'll carry on with a recap of the Solera system. Obviously, there are people who know this backwards who are watching, but just in case you're a bit rusty on the Solera system, I put this little animated slide in. All sherries are made using the Solera system, or at least 99% of them are. It's a matter of passing younger wine through a series of casks in an orderly fashion, of mixing younger wine with the older wine through a series of casks. So here what we have here is a Solera, which is the Solera stage is the final stage of the Solera system. And we have a criadera, usually named first criadera if it's a penultimate stage. And then the second criadera is the pre-penultimate stage. And then you can get number 3 and number 4 and number 5 and so forth. But this is a little sort of textbook diagram just to make it easy to understand. And so what we do, we take out a third from the Solera system, or maybe a bit more, maybe a bit less, depending on the sherry. And then that goes into the bottle, which we call a saca, translated into English as sack. That's why in the old days you see Shakespeare referring to sherry as sherry sack. And then the first criadera will top up the Solera stage, and they're called rocíos. So the first criadera is a similar amount is taken out, and that in turn is topped up from the number 2. So we're getting that filled up, and then in this case, in this diagram, we're talking about the line from the latest vintage filling up the first of the series of this 3-tier Solera system. There's a few idiosyncrasies every bodega has. For a start, Barbadillo, we call our criaderas classes. And our Solera is number 1, and the first criadera is number 2. So you've got those slight differences there. But anyway, that's the way it works, generally speaking. Now, in actual fact, it's a slightly more complicated than this. And here I'm going into specific detail about the Soliar Manzanilla, which we're going to taste in a moment. And for this, I need this aerial map of San Luca to show you the journey that the wine takes to become Soliar Manzanilla. So when we get the young wine from the vineyard, we take it down into the center area, which is basically where this boomerang shaped outline is. And that's where we fortify the wine. So the fortification is very minimal when it comes to Manzanilla. As I mentioned before, last year's vintage was 13.5. And so we only had to add 1.5% in alcohol to get to the 15% alcohol, which we require and is required by the Consejo Regulador of Jerez to be matured at in Solera. And then it's taken down to a bodega, which is in the top right with the arrow pointing there. In our first bodega called La Bodega de Bonanza. Bonanza is the name of the fishing port in San Luca, and Bonanza would be the pronunciation in English. And we have an amply sized bodega there. It's a very good place for the floor because not only is it at sea level where the humidity is high, but it's also at the narrowest point of the river. And that acts as a funnel, so the wind is actually strongest in that area. So we've got both the wind and the humidity there. In fact, many people complain that the floor is too thick in this part of town. But we find it's very good for the young wine. So we give it a big hit with the floor as a young wine when the young wine enters in from the vineyard. So we quickly turn what is a white wine into a fledgling Manzanilla. And then we take that is the first of the Solera system. So it's actually, in this case with Soliar, it's number 9. It's always a countdown. So number 9, the youngest wine, is then taken into the center of town here and into the circle in the bottom left. We have a bodega called San Agustin, where we have 3 stages. So 8, 7, and 6. That's where Soliar spends its time there. And then in the boomerang area, we find Criadera number 5. And then in a large cathedral-style bodega, which is called La Barbadillo, which is the one of these buildings there. Just go back. We have 3 stages, 4, 3, and 2. And then the final stage is in Las Pastoras Bodega, number 1, again in that same area. So let's have a look at some interiors of this bodega, one of these bodegas. Anyway, this is San Agustin. So this is actually somewhere in the middle of the whole maturation process. So I think this is number 7, Criadera, which is a very pretty bodega. It's all bodegas should have fairly high roofs and, as I say, be open to the air and in a good position in town. So these are all in the high town, as I mentioned. So they've got good access to the sea breeze where the wind blows quite strong because of the elevation we have. This is actually quite famous because of the roof, because it has no pillars to hold it up. And it's called the hanging roof, el techo colgante. And then I'll show you the jewel in the crown of bodegas, if you will. It's called La Arboladilla. So this is in the main complex area I showed you earlier. And this is this type of bodega is referred to as a cathedral-style bodega. So this is the second of its sort to be built in the 1870s. And it was built along with all the other cathedral bodegas specifically to make Manzanilla, or in Jerez, obviously Fino. And it was when they really, worked out how to optimize the microclimate to get the best growth of floor. So the high roof is a very important part of that design because that creates volume of air within the building, so we don't get any sudden changes of temperature. it also means all the cool air sits at the bottom, and that's where it's very, very constant in temperature. The buildings are all orientated, this cathedral building orientated towards the sea breeze. So that big round window, those two big round windows at the end, capture all that sea breeze. If you look the other way, there is no opening. It's closed off to the land breeze, which is hot and dry in the summer, so you don't want that. So these two facades on the left of this photograph and where the round windows are, they're facing that sea breeze and catching all the humidity and keeping it nice and cool. And it's also creating a lot of air movement. So you need a big, airy, lofty building to get that movement of air as well. This bodega is also very beautiful because of the arches with the holes in the middle, but that was also by design to reduce the weight of the arches so the pillars could be thinner, so there's more air and more air movement generally. It's also noticeable in this photograph that we see that the Manzanilla Carcerani stacked 3 high. This is an unwritten rule that's in virtually every Bodegas Barbadillo and other companies have. We only stack 3 high. This is there's a small difference between Fino producers and Manzanilla producers, where with Fino you see it stacked 4 or 5 high. The reason is because the closer to the ground, the higher the humidity and the greater the floor growth. And so that's why we like to keep it on the first 3 levels. The other thing to point out, as I mentioned, with the bodega map, where we went from one building to another, each stage is of the Solera system is in different blocks or in different buildings even. We can do this these days because of pumps and pipes and tanks on lorries, systems, driving from one part of the town to the other. In this case, we're looking over Criadera number 4, and then in the middle of number 3 on the far wall is number 2. So they're all in these blocks, and then we've got big holding tanks outside, underground, where, for instance, when we're pumping from number 4 into number 3, we take out number 4, the thirds out of each number 4 cask, and put it into one big holding tank. So it all comes together. Then we pump it back out again and top up the number 3 stage in that process. It's more efficient, and we get more homogeneity in that way. So here's another picture of La Bodegas, but it's also with my colleague and friend Montse Molina, who is the winemaker, head winemaker in Barbadillo. She's been working in the company now for 20 years and has been head winemaker for most of that time. And she's obviously responsible for everything from the grade through to the end product. And it's also a nice view of the bodega itself, where you can see that high roof that's over 40 meters high, with the round windows above. Now this is also be a good moment now to try our Manzanilla Solear, since we're in that bodega, so to speak. So this is the first of our samples. So if you would like to try some of this. Solear is actually a brand which goes back to the 1940s. So it's actually relatively new brand within the Bodega family. And it's, but as you can see, it's quite something. It's had this journey of going through 9 different stages in the Solera system. And it's taken over 6 years to make that journey. So this wine we have here, it's over 6 years old, and despite that, the color is surprisingly pale. And that's because of the way the floor works on the wine. It keeps its color down, it protects it from the oxygen, it keeps it young and fresh, if you will. Now the yeast stays alive for such a long time because of this Solera system, by the way. This movement of younger wine through the system is feeding the floor, keeping it alive, and therefore keeping the Manzanilla as Manzanilla. The actual movement, actually, of the wine from one cask to another, all this movement actually aerates the wine, and that oxygen is also very good for the floor as well. It doesn't actually oxidize the wine. because it doesn't have time. The floor quickly uses it up, and that helps boost the floor growth as well. So that simple movement of the wine also helps it in that sense. So as I say, this is a significantly aged Manzanilla with over 6 years of aging. Therefore, we've got quite a lot of complexity already here, and the subtle chamomile and yeasty notes coming through. Now, on the palate is what I find is as a great trait of a good Manzanilla is a smoothness on the palate. So it's very uniform across the tongue and across the palate. There's no overriding acidity anywhere. It's very smooth on the back, and very easy, basically very easy to drink. Now, to tell you a bit about the brand itself, it's a very popular one here in Spain. You'll see it in so many tapas bars and restaurants within Andalusia. If you go to Seville, for instance, it's all tapas bars, because Manzanilla has been very much a part of the gastronomy here in Andalusia. Its history goes back to the end of the 18th century. The first mention, in writing at least, of Manzanilla goes back to 1806. And actually, Barbadillo was the first one to ever ship Manzanilla in 1827. So we have obviously a very long association with this wine. So it goes very well with the local tapas, whether it be the shellfish, the seafood in general, but also with the salty items such as olives, as simple as that, and other things like artichokes and asparagus, cheese, and serrano ham. So, and that's its great strength, really. Its versatility to go with so many these different types of tapas and Iberian, Andalusian food. So let me carry on a bit and show you the final stage of the Solaris system. This is actually quite a modern bodega. I'm looking at it from the outside. It's not the prettiest, but it's very functional. All these windows are pointing, facing where I showed you that view earlier on over the river, and that catches all the sea breeze like all the others. But where the smaller windows you see are above that, there is this sort of dormer window structure on the roof, which lets the air in through the roof, and it's angled down by the structure of the roof to bathe the Solaris system with the sea air. And the Soliar, the final stage of Soliar is actually just on the other side of this wall, and the first row inside. So it's on the sea end of this bodega, which is where the floor growth is best. And if we go inside, this is what we see. We see the Manzanilla Soliar here, and this leads me also on to the next Manzanilla we're going to taste, because as you can see on this Solaris system, just below it, we've got Manzanilla Pastora. Now, Manzanilla Pastora is a Manzanilla Passada, and is actually a continuation of the Solaris system. To get to that stage, the number one stage of Manzanilla Pastora, it has to go through one more Criadera, and then the stage you're seeing here in this photograph. So that process of going through these two extra stages, takes an extra 2 years. And so I'll present you now with the Pastora wine, Pastora Manzanilla Passada, and the process here, as I say, with 2 years of extra aging, it's only gone through two extra stages. So the whole process has slowed down because it's taken so far 6 years for the Soliar to go through 9 stages. So that's slightly quicker. But with Manzanilla Passada, we slow the whole process down. So it takes 2 years to go through these 2 stages. This is important because what we're doing is slowing down the rate of movement and refreshment. So in fact, the floor begins to suffer and it thins out. But this is on purpose because we want the Manzanilla to come in contact ever so slightly with the air and be influenced with a bit of oxidation. And when we take a look at the result, you can see a color here which indicates very markedly that extra aging. We've got a much more golden color here than we have with the Soliar. So it's got it's actually a lovely golden color. I think it's it just shows the quality of the aging, in my opinion. But by doing this, making the floor suffer, we got that micro oxidation going on, but the floor is still alive and working well and still maintaining the Manzanilla taste and the smoothness on the palate. So on the nose, we're getting much more marked, pungent Manzanilla flavors. This is typical of the Manzanilla Passada as well, where we got much more marked chamomile aroma coming through. A lot of people say that's actually why Manzanilla is called Manzanilla, because of that chamomile aroma. Manzanilla in Spanish is actually, I mean, chamomile in Spanish is actually Manzanilla. So there is very much one of the theories. You know, there are two other theories, but that's one of them. The other theory is that maybe the wine that originally turned into Manzanilla, probably by accident in San Luca, actually came from a town called Manzanilla near Seville. And then when it was stored there before being shipped to America, it created this growth floor by accident, and it decided to call it Manzanilla for that reason. There's another theory that it's a diminutive of manzana, and that there is some likeness to apples, and you could certainly say that for some younger Manzanillas, but it's unlikely that you would say Manzanilla is a diminutive of manzana, which is Spanish for apple. So back to the wine itself. So it's a much richer feel to it on the mouth. You've got this certain sense of nuttiness, also an undercurrent of nuttiness, and that's really a good sign, because it's typical of a Manzanilla Passada, because basically a Manzanilla Passada is a halfway stage for the wine to become an Amontillado. So it's just beginning to show those sorts of characteristics. Now a little bit about the brand Manzanilla. This is this is photographs of the original label, which goes back over 100 years. So I mentioned the first shipment was made back in 1827, and it was referred to as Pastor. So that's how old this brand is. And the label itself, well, we don't actually have any of the original 19th century labels, but we have this ceramic on our original bodega building. And not very long ago, we decided to resuscitate it and create the Manzanilla label again, because I particularly love the yellow color and the Victorian style of design, and I was very keen on recreating this. So we did in the end. A couple of changes. We put the en rama status on the label, as you can see maybe on the photograph, but it's evident hopefully on the label. And that's really because this is Manzanilla. Manzanilla Passada is really the old style Manzanillas, what everyone used to drink in say the 1920s, and of course really everything was in Rama then anyway. But now we Barbadillo do all our Manzanilla Passadas en Rama, because it has a level of stability that allows it to stay well in unfiltered. En Rama means unfiltered, if you didn't know. And in fact, Barbadillo were the first to put en Rama, the wording en Rama on the label, to denote unfiltered sherry back in the 90s. So this is an extension of that concept. And so what we have as a result, we're able to enjoy all the flavors as if it was straight from the cask. For me anyway, if I'm tasting this abroad, it can take me right back to the bodega where we actually make it. So it really does work. This is actually the bodega where that ceramic is, and this is where Barbadillo started the business in 1821 in the centre of San Lucar. So again, this is one of those bodegas where it's in the high town, looking over the low town across the river. So ideal also for making Manzanilla. So next stage, I hope everyone's enjoying it. And so one of the difficult things with these things, you never get much feedback, so we don't really. I'm not sure if anyone's nodded off in this or what, but hopefully we're doing well. Now, as I mentioned, the Manzanilla Posada is a halfway house to becoming an Amontillado. And so what I'm going to show you now is basically the next stage. This is exactly the same wine again. So we're doing a vertical tasting effectively, seeing how that Manzanilla Soleil eventually becomes an Amontillado. So
I'm sorry, Tim, but I don't know if you can see our chat box. We are having a lot of comments about the wine, and Rama is so good. Rachel agrees with that. They are so happy with the wine. So let me tell you, I'm quite jealous because I don't have the samples with me right now, but I love that wines.
Good, great, good to know. Thank you,
That's very
Cecilia.
good. Thank you.
Okay. So this is the Amontillado Principe. It's a 12-year-old version we have here. So this is therefore just doing the maths here, but it's 4 years extra aging from the Manzanilla Pasada we just tried. But as I say, it's the same wine. But as you can see also very clearly, it's much darker. So it's gone through the full oxidative process to become a full-blown Amontillado. The process also involves evaporation. This is one of the factors, not just oxidation, but evaporation. So we're getting a bit of concentration of flavors and an increase in acidity as well. But it's still a dry sherry, obviously. What I love about this wine is it's got a very marked hazelnut nutty flavor. And on the palate, it's dry and really well focused. To me, it's a perfect aperitif. You know, the whole thing about aperitifs, even I guess it's pretty unfashionable, but if ever there was a good aperitif, this would be it, because it's very good at opening up the appetite. It doesn't fill you up before you started your meal. It opens the appetite. It goes well with a snack or anything before you start a meal. So to me, it's ideal for that reason. And it's such well-defined nutty flavors that we have here. We've also, we can sense the Manzanilla origins of this Amontillado. If you compare this to an Amontillado from a Fino, then you'll see a difference in style. I'm talking generally about San Lucar Amontillados to Fino Amontillados that come from Fino. So you can see the origins here in the style of the Amontillado. The photograph here is a small bodega. We don't have huge volumes. This is Amontillado, but we have it within the complex, not in an area which is particularly well blessed by the sea breeze, but we don't need that anymore. We can go into smaller buildings, lower roof, and it's perfectly happy there. what now we can do is continue on tasting from the this 12-year-old, and we can start looking at the well, the BORS over 30-year-old. The thing is, I won't try it because we haven't got much. And if I open this bottle, it's just one less to sell to anyone willing to pay for it. So I'll just show it to you. I have it with me. The label is rather nice because it's actually got some handwriting on it at the bottom, which is showing you the date of the bottling. Hopefully you can see that. The year of the bottling and the number of the bottle out of the number of bottles bottled. So this is number 32 out of 480 half bottles, which was the Saka of 2020. So my colleague Armando has to do this for all the labels and for all the BORS sherries. So he's let himself in for a lot of work. But this is essentially a much more intense version of the Principe Amontillado. Same wine, but further down the line. It's actually more along the lines of 50 years old, this one. So the BORS is officially over 30 years old. So the youngest component shouldn't be younger than 30. And it's certified on the back as such, BORS. So that's given the go-ahead with the Consejo Regulador. And what we find with this Amontillado is that the intensity is so much there, but it's also got other things coming through, flavors that you didn't see in the 12-year-old, suddenly coming through here. One of the things I find noticeable in this one is the coconut aroma, which has become more evident. But also, you get a sense of sweetness, an ethereal sweetness. There is even some sugar, sort of almost a few grams of sugar in there to actually give it that sense of sweetness. It's all to do with evaporation mainly, really, as well as time in these old casks. This is all old oak. The average age of these casks is about 40 years old. It's all American oak, so they're very well seasoned. It's very difficult for any oak flavors to come in onto the wine, but because this has been in oak for over 50 years, inevitably something's going to happen in that sense. So I think that's where that coconut is coming from in the aroma. But it's an amazing wine. I absolutely love it. So any excuse I have to go wander around to the Solera system with this, with the Canyon, and I'll be showing visitors around into that corner with the BORS Amontillado. So let me carry on then. I think we're okay for time, just. Going back again, because this is a photograph of the Sacristia, which is where we aged the Palo Cortado sherry that we have here. So this is the other BORS, and we have 3 Palo Cortados. We have the 15-year-old Obispo Gascon, and then we have this one, the over 30 BORS, which again is around the 50-year mark, just like the BORS Amontillado. And then we have a Reliquia Amontillado and Palo Cortado. And the Reliquia Palo Cortado is here, and that's about 100 years old. So we're talking about incredibly old sherries here. So the BORS one is an incredible version of Palo Cortado. Barbadillo is well known for its Manzanillas, but if it's well known for something else, it's also well known for its Palo Cortados. The Obispo Gascon 15-year-old is the one it's famous for, but this one is simply an older version of that, and it's just a much more concentrated version. So again, you're getting flavors which come through on this one, which you may not have in the younger version. But you've got the level of intensity and length on the palate. It just goes on forever. It's an extraordinary level of intensity, length on the palate, on the nose, and so forth. So it can stay with you for a very, very long time. You only need to sip this to really fill out your palate with the nuttiness, the complex dried fruit, dried orange peel flavors. There's all sorts of things going on there. We can talk about figs, we can talk about dates as well, but always in a dry context. So it's a fascinating wine to taste. You can taste it several times and always pick up something new in the process. So much as I'm tempted to open it, I'll have to keep it closed for the very same reason that we haven't got much of it. It's really quite rare. And this one is number 28 out of 240 whole bottles from 2020. But it all sells because it is a very popular wine within certain circles anyway. So on to the next one, where I think we're good for time. This is for something completely different, as they say. The Ataman vermouth. So this is something which we used to sell. Well, Barbadillo used to sell it in the 1960s, up until the 1960s, and then in 1970, it just stopped selling. There wasn't much of a market for it, and it just simply disappeared off the market. But what didn't disappear were several casks of vermouth and some tonic wine, quina as we call it, which have been sitting untouched really for the last 50 years. And then about 2 years ago, we decided to actually try and do something with this. We did a few restricted bottlings of the 50-year-old vermouth and the quina wine just for interest. But then what we've done is develop this vermouth here from really inspired more than anything by the original vermouth. We made a new one following as closely as possible the original recipe, which involved talking to the retired members of the bodega who used to work on the Solera. So we actually have to thank the workers in the bodega keeping this, because obviously over time this evaporates, and while the management had no idea it was there, they would keep on replenishing every so often with a bit of Oloroso just to keep it intact and the casks intact and so forth. And so we still got it thanks to them. But in this particular bottle, we got a small percentage of that original old vermouth and the quina, the tonic wine, in the mix, as well as the new vermouth with the ingredients copied from the original recipe. Now, I've got a slide to help myself more than anything else because there's so many things that go into it. Orange peel, rosemary, wormwood, quassia bark, elderberry, quinine. So these are the main ingredients. There are one or two others there as well. The result is actually extraordinary flavor, or above all an aroma. This I can open. This is it's amazing actually to think that we've just tried that. I just need to get an open on this. It's amazing to think that after trying that palo cortado, you can still, with all that aroma, that intensity, can still really appreciate something like this, because the aromas, of course, are very different. So, but it's got all that mixed of especially rosemary and orange peel. I think I pick up, but you can also pick up the Manzanilla, because it's a Manzanilla-based vermouth. There's a little bit of Oloroso in the mix as well. Now, ideally, to me anyway, you put this in a tumbler with a glass of with a block of ice and maybe an orange like that, and enjoy in that sense. With a bit of ice, it's great. Now, we talk about possible cocktails for vermouth, but actually this one, when I tasted it first, I thought it would make for a very good Negroni, but actually it is in itself in many ways a Negroni. You don't actually have to do anything. You just have to say, use a block of ice with a slice of orange, and you've got a great drink. it's quite something quite out of the ordinary, out of the nothing quite like what we've done in recent years. But strangely enough, the actual brand Ataman is an old brand from the 1930s. You can actually tell by the design; it's a bit Art Deco in style. And it was one that Manuel Barbadillo, who was in charge of the bodega at the time, thought up. Although we have no idea why he chose the name of Ataman, which basically means is referring to a Turkish soldier of some sort. But we have no idea why. But it's a lovely design and a nice name, so we decided to use it again. So ending off with something slightly different, but that is the journey. Hopefully hopefully hasn't been too long and too convoluted. But but we've tried. We've basically followed that grape from its origins through so many stages and to its end. Now, I know one of the questions I'm going to get asked, and that is explain the palo cortado. So apart from that, are there any other questions that you'd like to make?
Well, by the moment, there is no any more questions. We have one from Rose asking about the prices, more or less, the raw prices about the wines that you explained tonight.
Sure. Let me see what I've got here. So let me tell you about the palo cortado anyway, because I'm anticipating that question. But if it hasn't come up, that's interesting. But palo cortado it's always been a difficult one to define. The fact is that it depends on each winery how it's made. So in our case, for instance, we have certain select casks of Oloroso which originate from free run juice, and therefore they've got a much finer style than your normal second press Oloroso. But it's also a matter of chance as well. Each cask can be very slightly different because of its origins, because of its position in the bodega. But certain ones are just showing outstanding quality. So we select those Olorosos to then feed our palo cortado Solera system. Other producers, many other producers will do the same, but select from certain casks of Amontillado. But we choose certain casks of Oloroso. The end idea of a palo cortado is you're trying to get the best of an Amontillado in terms of aroma, and in terms of Oloroso, in terms of body and mouthfeel and flavour. So I think that's fairly evidently, I think that's what we've achieved with our palo cortado. So yes, the Soliar, it's available from Waitrose at, by memory here, I think it's £11. And it's also available in a half bottle at £6.75 from, most importantly, the Wine Society. The Pastora in a half bottle is available at £11. And you can get that from Hedonism, from Avery's, Connolly's Wine Merchants, Amazon. Principe 12-year-old, that's £30 and available from, again, Hedonism, Far Vintner, sorry, the Whiskey Exchange, the Drink Shop. The VORS is, the Principe VORS, the Amontillado, is available from Hedonism, so to the Palo Cortado, and it's also available the Palo Cortado in Far Vintners. There's not much to share around, so it's not going to be in many places. And the Ataman, it's a fairly new product, fairly early days, but we have it with the Good Spirits Company. I should be mentioning prices here. So the VORS is £64 per half bottle, both of them. And then the Ataman is £20 and available, as I say, I think in the Good Spirits Company, Noble Green Wines, and also in Amazon. So I hope that helps and answers your question.
It was great. Thank you so much. And we have another question more. Well, just she's wondering, when did you bottle the first vermouth, and what do you plan to do with the vermouth going forward? Will you continue expand the range or not?
Yeah, well, the very first of this vermouth, as in not the original one, which will go back 100 years, I guess. This vermouth, which we just done, we bottled for the first time. I think it was last year, actually. It was early last year or late the year before. So it's very, very recent. So it's all brand new. Certainly brand new to, we started selling it in the UK last year. And it has actually ended up in 1 or 2 cocktail bars and the like in London. And the reaction has been incredibly good. So the way we got it structured is that because we have a small amount of the original in there, what we've done is we've put the original vermouth into demijohns. These are very large glass bottles. So we're storing these demijohns in the bodega, and in this one here, so just round the corner, we've got these demijohns there, and we just take small amounts out of those to blend with the vermouth we make. At the same time, we've got a Solera system working with some more of the original vermouth and tonic wine. And we're creating the Solera system out of that, which will then, in the future, when we run out of the demijohns, we'll get the really old vermouth style from that, rather than what's left over in the demijohns. One of the things about a Solera system is that if you blend younger wine, in this case vermouth, with the older, well, in Spanish they say the older wine teaches the young wine, so it takes on those characteristics of the older wine. It accelerates the aging process, so you can get there more quickly by doing this Solera system. So we're thinking very long term. The whole process is small volume right now. We have the potential to be able to produce a lot more, not least because it's a Manzanilla base, and so we got quite a lot of Manzanilla to work with on that front.
Thank you, Tim. So there is here a comment coming out from the chat box. If we can do a poll with the favorite wine, what do you think? I have the poll ready.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I will do it. It will take half minute to you decide which was your favorite wine for tonight, and after that we will see the results. But by the way, waiting for that, I can read some great comments about the wines from tonight. Actually, I think all of them love the principle. Yours.
Yes.
This, yeah,
the Principe.
Gloria,
Yes,
thank you
the
so
Prince.
much.
Yeah,
and the last
I mean, they're all
question.
fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah. The last question, Henry Jeffries, he is wondering, when did you stop making the original vermouth?
Oh, in 1970. It was the last time we actually it was sold commercially. And then, as I say, it was just left untouched all that time, except thanks to 1 or 2 bodegas workers just keep looking after it, tendering it, if you will, in its long sleep. And we really, no one really knew it was there. We just, it was my colleague Armando Guerra, the one who wrote the letters on the label of the VRS. He's the one who was charged with looking around the bodega, seeing what we had, which might be useful. And he found these casts of that. There's a couple of other items which have been left untouched for many years. One of them is like a cocoa liquor, like chocolate, if you will, and the other one was what we call a ponche in Spanish. It's like a sort of fruit liqueur, and
yes,
that's
it's very
also
famous.
something which. Yeah. Sorry.
So as you can see here, we have the results. I think Barbadillo Príncipe Amontillado was the winner tonight.
Wow. Yes, it's yes by some majority. There's no There's got no recounting there on this one, I don't think.
Yeah. So 75% with Barbadillo Príncipe, and the second it was Barbadillo Obispo Gascón Palo Cortado. I love Palo Cortado.
Yeah. I mean, I completely understand why they've been chosen. Of course, they are amazing wines, and I have to say, on a daily basis, of course, one doesn't drink that, but it's such a treat. In my fridge, my fridge is just here, but I have the Soliar and the Pastor in my fridge at the moment, and the Amontillado is in the cupboard. So that was actually from my own stock, which I've used for this tasting.
That's so good. Well, we are running out of time. We are slightly 5 minutes out of time tonight, but it was wonderful presentation. Sure. Thank you so much for your time again. It was very informative. I love the pictures too. The floor one, it was amazing. You can realize how it works.
Thank you so much, Cecilia.
And it was my pleasure. Thank you for being with us tonight, and I wish you a beautiful weekend ahead.
Thank you very much, and thank you for all attending and your interest.